Okay. Okay, we are live. Welcome, friends. Welcome. A very special day today. We have my divine friends and Guru Bhais, my teachers, our support and leaders at Ananda Worldwide, Nayaswamis Jyotish and Devi, joining us for our satsang on Whispers from Eternity, this wonderful sacred book of answered prayers and poems. And this is part of a series of classes of interviews where I connect with people that share Whispers to a larger audience in some format or other, online or in person, or through blogs and other ways. And they share their kind of tips, what inspires them about it, and we bring our attention and our heart to this special sacred text. So welcome, Jyotish and Devi.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. I think Jyotish will begin with a prayer, if you would like to, just to start the energy of the interview here.
Great. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. O beloved Lord and Masters, help us learn to pray effectively, and more important than our prayers, to hear thy whispers returning thy love and thy joy to us. We know that as we reach out to you, you reach out to us to make that connection ever deeper, ever more joyful, ever more profound. Om, peace. Amen.
Beautiful. Well, welcome here. You're in Ananda Village in Northern California. I'm here in Ananda, Sacramento, also California. And we've kind of been connected for a few years. I moved to the village in 2012, and I knew you through Online with Ananda as it was just beginning in 2010. I think you did a couple of things online and we connected, and then we very kind of quickly, I kind of weaned my way into Ananda Sangha, into the office, and we got to know each other there. And it's been a great privilege to just, I think over time, I've really started to really feel more comfortable to connect as divine friends. I think in the beginning, it's a little bit more challenging just to relax. You know, you're the directors, but at the same time, you're just two regular people who live an extraordinary life through following these teachings, but you exude so very well divine friendship and support for people. So welcome and thank you for taking this time today. Anything you want to say in just
No,
introduction?
just from our viewpoint, we find it strange that people would feel at all reluctant or intimidated by us. Swami Kriyananda, toward the end of his life, because he would get that kind of feedback or how important he was and so on. He said if he was giving a lecture and he heard someone introduce him in that way, he'd say, it sounded like this great build up to a symphony and then the clashing of the cymbals and then this little mouse runs out onto the stage. That's the way he saw himself, the little mouse of God, about as intimidating as a piece of lint, you
Yeah.
know. So
also, I wanted to share when you said you kind of worked your way into the Sangha. I just want to say, Sanjan, that from all of our connections, and I think also Pranab, I know he considers you a dear friend. we always felt like you were a brother, even before you moved. You just were so sincere. And so you ran the meditation group in,
Wisconsin, Madison, yeah.
that's right, because that's where I went to college.
You went to college,
Um,
yes.
anyway, it was, you just always felt like someone we knew from before. And then when you, and you did different things at Ananda willingly, happily to do anything. And we were looking for a way to get you into the Sangha. So, there was online and then the Kriya Sangha. So anyway, it's Master talks about the importance of finding soul friends from other lives, that it's spiritually important because it's in a flow of soul friendship, and that keeps us, rather than just likes and dislikes or personalities or attractions and so forth. Divine friendship and soul friendship is really a divine gift. And so uh, we're very, very happy to spend time with you. And we're happy that you're living in our beautiful community in Sacramento now and
Yeah.
doing this very nice work.
Actually, thank you for saying that. And I really feel that divine friendship is, I mean, I always try to embody that in the beginning because Swami really embodied that. But there is still this kind of, it's hard to let go sometimes. I mean, maybe with you and Swami, how was it for you and with Swami in the beginning? Because here you come in fairly new. How was it? Could you just naturally, maybe for each of you, it's different, but how was that?
Probably a little different. When I met Swami, I met him first, not even knowing who he was. And so there was no big aura of the teacher or anything like that. I just knew that there was supposed to be a direct disciple of Yogananda's living in San Francisco. And so my brother-in-law and I went over one Sunday and knocked on the door. And obviously, as soon as we met him, we could tell his vibrancy and his power and a clarity of thought and magnetism, all of that. But it wasn't for me as if I saw a whole group of people kind of in awe of him.
Right.
And so it was easier for me just to relate to him as this very fine. I think my first relationship was to him as a teacher. He was 17 years older than I, and he had been a direct disciple, and he obviously knew the teachings. And so I related to him as a teacher, but probably not much more of a sense of distancing than if you go to college and you have a very fine teacher and there's just a small class. You have respect and you have a sense of acknowledgement of his knowledge and position, but it doesn't distance you very much.
Yes.
So I had probably, you fast forward 5 or 10 years, and most people would see him, and there would be a crowd of 100 or more people listening to him and all focused on him. And so it created more of a distance. I think if you'd come to know Davy and me at the time, roughly that we met Swami, there wouldn't have been any sense of distance at all. You'd have just felt, oh, another one of the couple of the guys that lived there.
But Swami also, he had a beautiful balance because we always knew that he was not one of us, but in the sense that he was on a higher spiritual plane. But at the same time, he worked so hard to make us feel comfortable in his presence. I'll just tell 2 brief stories. One, this was the first time I was ever in his presence socially. I'd been in classes, satsang, Sunday service, and so forth. But he asked a big group, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 people, to go into Nevada City to see a movie. And I was part of that group. And the movie was the Walt Disney movie, Swiss Family Robinson, which I think I had never seen before. And I was just sort of puzzled. how does this great yogi want to see this movie? And so we all got our tickets and filed in, and somehow it ended up that I got to sit right next to Swami. And he was very enwrapped during the movie, engaged. And at a certain point I said, Swami, are you enjoying this movie? And he said, oh yes, I've seen it 7 times. It just blew my mind. But I came to understand because it's about building community, essentially. But then another moment that was very precious to me, because I always thought that to be at Ananda, to be following this path, and you had to be perfect. You just had to be entirely competent and knowledgeable and, everything.
Like me.
It wasn't like you. But I just thought, it had to be real, yes, sir, okay, yeah, like that. So this was, Swami, the person who usually brought him his mail from the central mail room, had another engagement. So they asked me if I would bring his mail to him. And I was happy to. And they said, don't talk with him. He's writing. Just there's a little table by the door. Just put the mail there and leave. And I said, okay, I can do that. Because I was a little intimidated just to go over to his house by myself. And so I knocked on the door. He was at his typewriter in those days. And he'd come in, and I just said, here's your mail, Swamiji. And I just started to leave. And he said, oh, could you make me a cup of coffee? And I said, certainly. But I didn't know how to make coffee because I didn't drink coffee. And I thought, oh God, this is the moment of truth. He's going to see what a total idiot I am. And so I went up into the kitchen, and I knew it had something to do with boiling water. So that's as far as I knew. So I just started boiling water, and it was boiling in a pot, and it was sort of going down and down. I can't believe I was so stupid. Anyway, at a certain point, the water was almost boiled away. And Swami came up into the kitchen, and he said, he looked at the water and he looked at me, and it took him a minute to understand what was going on. And then he said, don't you know how to make coffee? And I just said, this is the moment of truth. He's going to ask me to leave. I don't think you're really ready for this path. And I said, no, Swami, I don't. And he just started laughing. And he just gave me the most kindly, fatherly hug. And that was a huge breakthrough for me.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a family, and my educational system was all performance standard, had to win love.
Yeah.
And by how well you did. And here I was being a total idiot. And that was the first personal connection I had with him. So that was a big moment for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I had 2 moments where one was we were preparing for an evening with Shakespeare. The younger generation were making it, and it was very simple. We were putting some stuff in the fridge in his apartment because we didn't have enough space upstairs. And he just came out and he was making room in the fridge for this, I think it was spinach or lettuce. And it was just very kind of, he was just relating to us where we were right then and kind of just trying to help out. And it was just very sweet. Mm-hmm. And then the other time was I was serving food at a satsang, and I was walking down the stairs in the Crystal Hermitage Dome. And Swami says to me, it's like 40 people. I think it's connected to the movie or something. And he says to me, so you're Justin, I keep hearing your name. And and without even thinking anything, I say, with no thought at all, I say, that's funny, I keep hearing your name.
Good response. I bet he loved it.
And well, the thing was, everyone laughed, but he didn't hear it. And I felt so embarrassed that I'd said this thing that I didn't actually connect very much with him in that moment. I was too embarrassed that, it was just one of those moments. But
at the end, his hearing was bad. Yeah. But if he would have heard it, he would have laughed.
Yeah, I can guarantee you that he would have laughed if he had heard it.
Absolutely. So, well, beautiful start. Thank you for sharing that. And now we'll come to Whispers from Eternity. because you've been with Swami from, moved to Ananda, I guess you helped create Ananda Village Jyotish, and you moved to it, Devi, in 1970?
69.
69. So there was no books at that time from Swami. Did Swami through those early years mention whispers? Was it something that came up, or not really?
Yeah, no. First of all, there were very few books from Swami. He had one which was at that time called Eastern Thoughts, Western Thoughts. It was little sayings, philosophical sayings. And he had published cooperative communities, how to start them and why.
Yours the Universe.
And Yours the Universe. So he had a few books. And in fact, one of my early jobs was helping him print and then distribute those. We did the printing ourselves in his living room of his apartment in San Francisco. But he had, and by extension, those of us who were interested in Yogananda had basically all of the books that Yogananda had in print. And so obviously Autobiography of a Yogi and Whispers from Eternity, Master published that early on, Songs of the Soul. And I don't remember there being at that time the collections of Master's
No, this
talks.
came out later.
They came out later, but there were a few books that Master had published early on.
Science of Religion.
Yeah, Science of Religion. And so I think I had all of those, and Whispers was among those. And so I don't really remember my first introduction to Whispers, but it would have been probably in 1967 or 1968 that I would have acquired that.
Yeah, and did so no special mention from Swami about it as such at that point, or how much it had touched him, or anything like that?
He may have mentioned it, but it doesn't stand out in my mind. His focus really throughout the years was more on what he was doing, what he was writing.
Yeah.
And so that would have been more the focus. It would have come up maybe in a lecture, maybe in some casual conversation, but it wasn't so poignant that it stood out. And I remember, oh yes, I so remember what Swami said about Whispers. It was part of the general background of absolute discipleship to Master.
Yeah, I think he emphasized the autobiography a lot more, and would share stories from that and use it as illustrations of the teachings. But in a certain way, Whispers is something that you need to kind of grow into. It's really, and I think that's why people now are picking it up with such interest and such inspiration, is because you need the deep attunement and discipleship to really draw what he created, Master created in that book.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, just, I tried in the beginning to really connect with it, and I could sense its power, but I couldn't really get the depth that has come. And so I agree with you there. And so...
Well, that's a relief.
Sorry?
You said, I agree with you there. I said, whoa, that's a relief.
Well, it's good to get my stamp of approval, So when did you start to, you're recently, Jyotish, in a talk on January 5th for Master's birthday, there was a celebration for Yogananda's birthday, which we celebrate every year. In that talk, you share about that you're going, share about Whispers, that it's one of the 3 scriptures that Master was highlighting, and that you were going to practice it every day. So, and there'll be a link to that talk below, as well as Jyotish and Devi's A Touch of Light blog, and the books that they, of those blogs and other books that they have authored. But so what was it that drew you to it then? Had you, during your years leading up to that, kind of been touched by it, or because you're kind of so busy building a community and leading people? What's the relationship with Whispers for both of you, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, the Whispers has such a wonderful and deep introduction to it.
Does.
And so I think I probably at the beginning related to that more than I did to the prayers themselves, because it was as if in that Master was opening up the whole world of how to pray and what prayers are and how they can be effective and all of that. Then the prayers themselves, to be quite honest, it took me a while to get into them. They seemed a little antiquated to me. There were a lot of these and thous and shalts and so on, which for a person of my generation growing up in America seemed to come from someplace that was fairly far away. It was either, you know, antiquated, almost colonial American English, or it was some sort of a way that people talked, but nobody that I knew ever talked like that. So it seemed to me erroneously as if the use of that terminology made those prayers formal and kind of distant, even though, of course, Master didn't. I knew intellectually that that was a way of, it's actually a familiar form of English, to speak or to pray in that way, but it certainly did not strike me. So the without belaboring the point, the prayers were a little harder for me to get into. Over the years, I would not only hear, but we would always read prayers from a prayer from Whispers at the beginning of Sunday services. And so there would be more of an attunement then. But as I say, it took me a while to get into them. So what the breakthrough for me was to get into the meaning of the prayer, the bhav, the vibration of the prayer behind the words.
Yes.
And when I did that, then not only did they come alive, but they became almost like a living reality of how you relate to the divine. And so over the years, gradually, they took on more and more depth of meaning to me. And then just to finish, the thought of, you know, toward the beginning of the year, I always kind of review the year past and look ahead to the year. And it's like the New Year's resolutions, but the spiritual resolutions. And, you know, if I ever write them down, I would have the same resolution for decades, which is to tune in more deeply to Master, would be one of my resolutions, because I'm always trying to do that. Well, that coincided with someone sending out a mailing. I think it came from Crystal. No, I think Ananda Publications in India.
Right.
That they were talking about how I think they were going to publish or reprint Whispers
In Hindi.
in Hindi. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And in that said that Master had said that there were three things that he considered scripture, one of them being whispers. And it really struck me forcefully. If Master thought that highly of these prayers, then if I'm trying to attune with Master, this is the channel through which I can do that. And it was, for me, honestly, a divine revelation, because they have become so meaningful and so deeply vibratory for me that it's a great blessing to have connected in that way.
Great.
And, just to, when Jyotish mentioned, the master said there were three scriptures, the other one being Whispers, the other two, the Bible and the Gita, just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. But, it was interesting when Swami, I don't think he thought about it, but when he started editing, I mean, he'd obviously been reading it for years and years. And he says this in his preface or to the book. He says, during Master's lifetime, another one of Master's major editors, a woman, Taramata, who edited Autobiography of a Yogi, she said to Master, can I edit Whispers? And Master said, oh, would you? And, meaning he really wanted somebody to do it. But she, for whatever reason, she did not do it. And so I think, I don't know what prompted Swami to edit it, but it just, all of a sudden he said, Master wanted it edited. When I read it, sometimes there are mixed metaphors, it's not, and sometimes the language is a little archaic, and as Jyotish was saying, and he said, I don't want there to be any barriers for people in reading this. And so I had read the other edition, not not regularly, but when I read what he had done, and I've never sat down and compared one to the other. Oh, he changed this word. That could be an interesting project, but
I think actually Dharmadas and Nirmala sat with Swami Kriyananda and actually compared.
oh, did they? Wow, that would be
compared
fun.
them. Yeah.
But it reads so beautifully now. And the cover, I don't know if people know this, you held it up, but this artwork, it's very lovely, it was done by a young woman who was in Ananda College. She was from India, and her name was Chitra. I don't remember her last name, but she was a very gifted artist. And so she didn't do this for the cover, she just did this painting, and Swami saw it. And he said, oh, that would be perfect for Whispers. And so it's a sweet story, because he was always trying to draw people in. He could have found a picture of Master or whatever, but he was trying. And she went back to India. She is a graphic artist professionally. She married, but she stayed in touch, so that was like a bridge that he built with her. And so we're very fortunate to have this book. And
and Davey, are you, Jyotish has picked this. Are you diving into it this year?
I am. I don't know, I bet 15 years, maybe more. My little, next to my meditation seat was Metaphysical Meditations. And I would read one, open randomly, and read one every single day. And I traveled, and when we go on our trips around the world, I'd always bring it. I'd always have it next to me. And that was how I always felt like, Master, what do I need to learn today? What do you want to say to me? But because I'd been using it so much, it was like I was a little familiar with it. It was becoming a little bit, what word can I use? It didn't engage me in the same way. And then Jyotish said, I'm really getting a lot out of Whispers. And I thought, well, maybe that's the next thing for me. So I've started it too. And I'm a little later than him in the process, but it was just the shot in the arm I needed too, because really, Master didn't, there's nothing else that he's done anywhere near what Whispers is. And Swami also says in his preamble, it's such a great book because Master explored every single prayer or question or bhav or doubt that a devotee could have and gave you a prayer to work with that.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful thought.
it's incredible. And that whole introduction, I mean, there's the aspect of how to pray effectively, but there's also this section, or kind of multiple sections on just really the spiritual path. I mean, there's some just phenomenal lines in there, just in the sense of kind of like really truly becoming a child of God, and we have to think, meditate, believe that we are a child of God, and we may not happen immediately, but we need to start now, and we need to destroy all of these kind of false beliefs that we're a weak human. And just I think that whole introduction feels like you could study it, for a period of
Absolutely.
time and just really dive into it. So
It really is, as you say, it's a summary and an introduction and a conclusion to the spiritual path.
it's quite incredible. And then even at the end, I don't know if you've gone into the ending at all. I've gone into it less than the introductions, but there's that kind of 3 sections. I think it's I can't even remember what it's titled, the Cosmic Dream or something, and
Yeah.
it's just talking about how everything was created through God,
Yeah.
being a child, and then kind of dying, and kind of the celebration of that. That in itself is
Yeah. If in a certain sense, if that's all Master ever wrote, it could be your guideline to finding God.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
And Master really felt like this is a universal scripture. And I have this feeling, I don't know whether you've thought about this at all, but that if someone who wasn't on our path necessarily, but who really sincerely dived into the scripture, I feel like they would certainly go very far with God if they really dived deeply into it.
Absolutely. It shows not only the proper relationship between a seeker and God, the familiarity, being a child, the use so often of Divine Mother or Father images. It shows not only the proper relationship with God, but also the proper relationship to the world. It's so many of the prayers are about unity and bringing things together and removing the distance and seeing all people as extensions of your own self and loving all of the religions. And there are just, it's a very, very profound work. It's really a manual on how to live.
Yes. And so there's obviously several ways that Master says you can tune into the book. The way I think that you're tuning in, Jyotish, is that kind of almost the last page of the introduction, where it's kind of developing cosmic consciousness, where you take one whisper a day and kind of, practice it, bring it into your meditation practice. How is that? Is that what you're doing?
Yes, what I've been doing, and it's working quite well for me, is that I meditate and do all of the techniques. And then after doing the techniques in meditation, I try to commune very deeply with the light at the spiritual eye, the sound of Om, whatever it is that allows my consciousness to go deep and expand into a universal as opposed to personalized. It's just the way I'm built. I like to do it that way.
Yes.
And then toward the end of my meditation, as my mind begins to, it's almost like I'm not done yet, but I can see that I'm going to have to wrap up pretty soon. Then I take the book and I read one of the whispers, and I'll read it typically several times. And first I'll read it through, and then I read it through a little bit at a time, and I try to catch the really salient thought in here. And I'll read it through in Master's words, a sentence or a phrase at a time. And then I'll stop, and it's almost like I rephrase that idea, that central thought. It might be, that I'll read one later on, but it might be that I don't want any memorized or formal prayers or just repetition to be my prayer. I want it to spring from my own sense of devotion. And so I'll take that salient thought and then I'll try to rephrase it and relate to it deeply. And so I try to get inside of what Master has done, but also how that what Master has done in that prayer resonates and relates to me in where I am, where I'm trying to achieve the same thing.
Which is really important, which is what Master has said to do. Beautiful, very well described. I just love that. Beautiful. And then, so do you follow on? Like, did you start at number 1 and you go to number 2, or are you?
I started that way, and then I'm still going progressively, but there have been a couple of times where I haven't wanted to progress. I didn't feel like I wanted to be pushed by the fact that today is the 32nd day, and therefore I have to do the 32nd prayer. That seemed, I started out, as I said, doing that, but after, I don't know, a week or so, it seemed a little bit artificial to do it that way. But I am going through sequentially through the prayers that are in there. And there may come a point at which I'll begin to skip around, but I don't want to skip around yet, because I suspect that when Master wrote the prayers or put them, that there was a sense of order in his consciousness that helps the devotee develop in a certain way. So I don't want to say, oh, I don't need that attitude. I got that one down pat, so I'm going to skip ahead.
Yes.
So I am going sequentially, and then it may be in a year or two that I'll do what Devi had been doing with, metaphysical meditations, where I just open it randomly, because I'm now kind of more familiar with the flow.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I do also have this feeling. I haven't been following it sequentially, but I do know I want to get to that stage at some point. And I do have this feeling that even though in some ways it doesn't feel like, it's in some ways you could say it's random, but I do also have this feeling, Master, is probably there's a divine order to it that really does build upon it. Amazing.
Yeah, if nothing else, Master didn't work from logic the way that we work from logic. So we, with our logical minds, we might say, oh, it would be better to order it this way or that way.
Yeah.
But Master worked from pure intuition. And this especially, he's being guided by God and by the God within him. to express this. And so if there was an order to how that intuition and inspiration came to him, I don't want to lose the, I don't know, the value and the potential of that by arbitrarily letting logic intrude and saying, oh, whatever it would be.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to a moment. David, do you want to say anything just about?
Yeah, just for a moment. I was trying to find, forgive me for kind of pulling away. I was trying to find a certain poem, and anyway, yeah, it was interesting for me because this is a little bit personal, but before Jyotish mentioned that he was connecting with whispers, one morning I was meditating and asking God to help me. And at a certain point, I thought, I'm so tired of coming like a little beggar to God. Oh, help me, help me, help me to go deeper, help me to love you, help, please let me feel your love. And I just thought, I'm not sure that's the right attitude. And I want to come to God not asking, but giving. And then then I read that whole thing about the prayer demands. And I thought that's exactly what I was trying to get at. That and I could feel a greater depth in meditation before I read what Master had written, when I stopped begging and I just said, Master, I feel your presence within me. I feel your strength within me. And from that place, I reach out to you. And I could feel like he was saying, yeah, that's the way to do it. That's better. And then when I read that, it was like, yeah, that's, so it's really, it's a very subtle shift, but it's very important for people's sadhana, for their, I should say, for their relationship with God to come as a child, this is my birthright. I am your child. Um, I'm not, I'm not some foreign stranger immigrant that's come to your shores, homeless, begging. But no, I'm your child, and I know that you want to help me. So actually, that was a real breakthrough for me. And then when that little shift, and then when I, read the whispers, then um, I try to do them in that same way, from a point of inner strength, not from a point of beggarliness. And what I was trying to find, and I think it's in Songs of the Soul, it's not in Whispers, but Master's Book of Poems, but the poem When I Am Only a Dream, when
Yes.
he talks about, after he's gone. And he says in there, read my whispers from eternity. Silently, I will speak to you through them. So, that's a pretty powerful statement.
It's a great way to tune into him. Yeah, and it's very interesting. I don't know what to say, but it's very interesting seeing, when Swami passed. And this is a kind of sounds totally different, but when Swami passed, you guys, both of you guys, you both had to step into this role, and I can imagine that was, well, I don't know how it was, but I can imagine it just was quite a lot all at once, everything, even though you knew it was on the cards. But just how you've kind of stepped into that role, you've kind of become these. I think in the beginning it might have been just, you're kind of like all the responsibility of all of that. But who you really have become is just like, now you're the child, you're you've accepted the divine inheritance, and it's not like an ego, it's just you're in that role and being what God has asked of you. And it's kind of the same thing with what you're saying there. It's kind of like we have been given, we are children of God, and it really is just accepting that. And it seems very subtle, but a massive difference with how you kind of relate to your spiritual path. I don't know if that made any sense, but
Of course it did.
Yeah, it did. You know, it's almost as if we have two minds. One is the mind that pertains to the ego and the sense that who I am is this personality, this body, this life history, these skills, and so on. And then the other sense of I-ness is from the soul. And it's a sense of being a part of everything that is. And all of the expansive things that pertain and come about when you forget the ego. Well, if you're in ego consciousness, you always will feel inadequate to whatever's there. You can be the richest person in the world and you'll feel you don't have enough money. You can be the president of the United States and be frightened because you don't have any support or power or any, whatever it is. Or if you flip to the other side and think of your ego as, oh, I'm so great, then, you know, there's no way out of the dilemma as long as you come from ego consciousness.
Right.
And so being intimidated by the role, if I'm in ego consciousness, I'm still intimidated by the role. If I'm out of it, I'm not intimidated by the role because God's doing it anyway. And so it really is not an outer, even a sense of growing into it. It's how you view yourself. And if you view yourself as part of God, as a child of God, or an extension of God, then it's God's responsibility to do these things. And you have to be a willing participant, energetic and dynamic participant, but the responsibility doesn't fall on you.
You know, the year that Swamiji passed, 2013, we returned to India then. He passed in April, and then in September, we had planned a trip to India. And so it was our first time going there after Swami had passed. And we knew it was going to be a significant trip and a little more than a little intimidating. But a friend of ours from the city of Bangalore set up for us to have a reading. Maybe people are familiar with Swami wrote about the book of Brigu, which is prophetic readings for people according to their astrological birth, their chart, their birth date, time, place. But they were done thousands of years ago by great sages who could see, who weren't limited by time. So there's a reader in Bangalore. It's not Brigu, it's another reader. It's called a Nadi, N-A-D-I, and it's from Sukhdev. He was the one who created them. And so they said, would you like a reading? And we said, yes, we would. And in part, we wanted, how do we move forward here? That was the question. And we submitted our birth information, and they don't have readings for everybody, but they did have readings for us, and so we went.
So just to clarify, so someone had written this thousands of years ago.
Thousands of years ago.
Your chart,
Right.
so the viewers understand fully. So someone had written that thousands of years ago about both of you.
Right. And so what we got was a little reading on palm leaves, kind of folded up accordion style. And whatever was there was written in Sanskrit. And because, it deteriorated, they would have copied something periodically. So I don't know how old it was, but it was obviously long pre-existing our coming there. And Swami had his Brigu reading tested and wanted to know if it was modern. And the professor who tested it said something to the effect of, "Oh, this is
Not that old.
not that ancient at all. I doubt that it's more than 300 or 400 years old." So whatever. So I have the same feeling about ours.
Yeah.
That this probably was several hundred years old,
Okay.
at the least. And so here was this fellow, a pundit, reading in ancient Sanskrit from palm leaves that were a couple of hundred years old. And then I'll let Devi continue.
So, first he talked about our present life, or, just more, and it was amazingly accurate. I mean, kind of frighteningly accurate, just details of our life, our health, our family,
Things like you have one son and he has 3 children, so you have 3 grandchildren.
And you're very close to the oldest. Davy is very close to the oldest granddaughter, and and just on and on. I mean, about our health and anyway. But then the thing that was the most significant, that really answered our prayer, was he also said, "You've been following the same 3 masters for many," and he knew nothing about us. All he knew was our birth date information. That's all. And he said, "You've been following the same 3 masters for many lifetimes: Babaji, Master Yogananda, and Swami Kriyananda." So, I mean, that was amazing. But the reason I bring this whole thing up, and it isn't just relevant to us, but to everybody, he said, "You will uphold the honor of your guru's work." And that he couldn't have said it in any more assimilatable way, because are we good enough, can we carry this out, all these questions. But we knew we would try to uphold the honor of what Master and Swamiji had done. And I say that to you and to maybe everybody who's on this path, who might be listening. Maybe we can't be everything we would like to be, but if we can follow the path with integrity, and honor what Master brought, that's a huge thing. And when we heard that, we both started crying, actually, and we just thought, we can do that. We can do that.
Wow.
I'll relate one more thing he said, because it's pertinent to so many people. He was going through our life history, and he said, well, the purpose of this life is Guru Seva, service of the Guru. And he was reading from mine, and he said, "You have never engaged in business." And from the early years at Ananda, I started a incense business, incense and oils, and employed many people. So I stopped him and I said, "Oh no, I was engaged in business and ran a company." And he said, "Did you do that for personal profit, or did you do that in order to help the Guru's work?" I said, "Well, in order to help the Guru's work." He said, "Then it's not business, it's Guru Seva."
Wow.
And there are many, many people who feel, I don't know, somewhat like inadequate, or something's wrong with them because maybe they work in a bookstore, or maybe they are, I don't know,
Computer
programmer, or whatever it is. And so, but that answered the question, do you do what you do in order, everybody needs to support themselves, but what is the thrust? Are you trying to do this for personal becoming famous or something? Or are you doing it as an act of Guru service? And that applies to so many, many people at Ananda.
Yeah, it's not what you do, it's the attitude behind it. And if it's done really in the spirit of service to the Guru.
Which brings us right back to whispers. It's the attitude behind that which you do, which is the determining factor.
Yeah. Now, have you found, thank you for sharing that. That was very special. I really appreciate, just thank you. have you found that kind of your regular prayers or your meditations have kind of transformed from diving into whispers? Is there, how you approach your regular prayer, is there more feeling to it or anything like, has it kind of seeped into other aspects of your life or inner life or, anything like that?
Yeah, I would say yes, but in multiple ways,
Mm,
so it's like the whispers do a little attitudinal correction.
mhm,
And that attitudinal correction is not just about the subject of that prayer. It is universally applied.
mm,
So often Master is talking about deepening the devotional aspect.
mm.
And that comes into everything else in sadhana, to do your techniques, your kriya, your other techniques with more of a sense of devotion. So I would say that, it's getting into one of these whispers is like taking a bath in the Ganges. When you get out of the Ganges, that bath, the water from the Ganges drips all over everything else you touch. And so it's kind of like that.
A wonderful way to describe it. Beautiful. Davey, any thoughts for you around that or?
It just, what we're all striving for is a sense of deep personal, I should say what I think what we're all striving for, it's certainly true for me, is a deep personal connection, in fact, even intimacy with the Guru, where you feel like he knows me, he's speaking to me, he knows what my problems are, he knows my challenges, my tests, and when I read them, it's like he's speaking to me. And and then that helps me just to it just deepens your guru disciple relationship because you just feel like, wow, he's speaking my language. And it's like it's not coming, it's not like reading a book that somebody else has written. It's like, wow, that's what was in my soul. And he just
Right,
put words to it. So again, you just feel like, wow, this, it just brings the guru and the disciple much closer together.
right. Thank you. Now, do you want to, is there a whisper? Would you like to read a whisper or we're kind of
Yeah.
coming towards the end? Um, is there one that's been speaking to, your heart or?
Yeah, this is one that just came up 2 or 3 days ago, but it really struck me. So
Hmm,
I'll just read it. It's quite short. It says, I will not offer unto thee mind-made hothouse songs. I will sing a song uninfluenced by the voice of any others. I will offer thee my own pristine heart melodies. I will sing thee a song unheard by any. I have nurtured this song child myself. Now I bring it to thee for higher training. It's a beautiful line. I have
oh,
nurtured this song child myself. Now I bring it to thee for higher learning, higher training. I will offer thee no intellectual, premeditated, art disciplined song. What I offer thee are the wild songs of my heart. I will offer thee not civilized, emotion packed music or artfully cultivated songflowers, but wild blossoms that grow on the high hills of my soul. Just a just a
lots to think.
beautiful.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
incredible.
that
Beautiful.
that's one that I read over and over and then tried to get behind, and it was very impactful because I as I read that, I found that probably most people, get into a kind of a habit pattern of repeating a prayer that's been repeated over and over and over again. And it's almost like a musician who can play the guitar and they're strumming a song, but it's muscle memory that's strumming the song. And they're thinking about something else or talking to somebody, and the song itself is no longer really relevant. And here Master is talking about, I'm not going to offer you any of those prepackaged songs of that way.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I could go on, but I think you're both very busy people. I just wanted I'm going to mention an event that you had mentioned in a moment, but any last thoughts to people just about whispers, what I think maybe you've said everything, but if there's anything to say.
Just use it as a vehicle to deepen your relationship with God.
Yeah.
On a very personal level, because it's a very personal scripture.
Yeah.
And he created it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I would say too, that Master is not someone outside of any of us. He is our own higher self. And so these are not prayers done by somebody outside of ourselves. This is our own higher self putting into words the longing and the thoughts and the questions and the doubts of our own heart, our own soul. And so these are your own higher self speaking to you in words that you can understand.
Yeah. It's like it's a lamp lighting us on the spiritual journey. Master's going ahead.
A wonderful way to close this interview. Thank you for taking the time. Now you have a live event which I'll put I'll put all the links that I mentioned at the beginning to your blogs, etc. But you're also doing an event in India, but you'll be here in America, and that's on the 6th of March. I think it's 8:30, we think Californian time, and whatever time it is in India.
At night.
Yeah, 8:30 in the evening. It's 10 o'clock in the morning.
Sunday
in India.
That's for Master's Mahasamadhi. And it'll be lovely. I hope people can join us. Nayaswami Jaya will be at the Temple of Light here at Ananda Village, and the three of us will put it on.
Well, I'll get that link from Jitendra, and we'll put it below, and hopefully everyone will join us. Thank you so much, Jyotish and Devi. It's been a very special time with both of you, and I look forward to continuing on this path with you and exploring our inner whispers as we move.